Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Hunyo na mga kapatid. Half of the year has passed at mukha sa Pasko na yata tayo magkakasama-sama muli. We all know that the past 6 months had been challenging for all of us. And we may be asking, kailan matatapos ang pagsubok at na pinagdadaanan natin? Mukhang malayo-layo pa ang ating tatahakin. For some reason, the Lord planned for us to be alive at this time. What kind of attitude kaya, mga kapatid, or purpose does the Lord have for each of us for such a time as this? We're going to go back some 2,600 years ago to the book of Esther. And here we find the story of an orphan Jewish girl who becomes queen of Persia and later on becomes instrumental in saving the Jews from sure death. Although God's name does not appear in this book, makikita natin yung fingerprints ng ating Panginoon all over the story. His presence is so overwhelming that there was no need to even mention His name. We live in uncertain times and I would say chaotic and even dangerous times. So what do we do in such a time as this? We're going to take a look at a few scriptures to understand what God was orchestrating behind the scenes. So the first point is we look to God's providence. Let's begin in reading Esther chapter 2 in verse 1. Later, when King Xerxes' fury had subsided, he remembered Vashti and what she had done and what he had decreed about her. Then the king's personal attendants proposed, "Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm, and to bring all these beautiful young women into the harem at the citadel of Susa. Let them be placed under the care of Hegai, the king's eunuch, who is in charge of the women, and let beauty treatments be given to them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This advice appealed to the king, and he followed it. Let's jump to verse 17. Now the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor and approval more than any of the other virgins. So he set a royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. And the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Alam niyo mga kapatid, according to some statistics, the whole Persian Empire, which stretched from Libya hanggang sa borders of India, they said had an estimated population of 50 million people. So if halimbawa na lamang they had 10 million women, they narrowed it down to 400 of the most beautiful women. And you know, Esther won the crown. I can't help but think that from the beginning, God was orchestrating this move. In Esther chapter 2, verse 21, naman, here's another example. During the time Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the annals in the presence of the king. Again, what timing that Mordecai would be sitting at that time, at that moment, that these two officials were conspiring to assassinate the king. And who was there to hear it? Mordecai, who through Esther warned the king of this plot. We can't help but think that God allowed Mordecai to be in the right place at the right time to hear this plot and thus save the king's life. Punta naman tayo sa Esther chapter 6, verse 1 to 3. That night, the king could not sleep, So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. Grabe na ito. The king could not sleep. And instead of drinking wine or listening to music, he decides that reading the Chronicles would be his best form of relaxation. And what does he read? A report of Mordecai's role in preventing the assassination attempt of Bigthana and Teresh against him. How can we not think that God was moving here? But it does not end there. Kasi at that moment, that the king was considering how to reward or honor Mordecai, Haman was entering the court to ask King Xerxes permission to have Mordecai impaled. Kaaway talaga ito ni Mordecai at ng mga Jews. But what happens? He ends up being commanded by the king to put royal robes on Mordecai, then put him in a horse while Haman was shouting, "This is done for a man who the king honors." Hindi na nga niya napatay. Inonor pa niya. Kung hindi si God ang gumalaw doon, hindi ko na alam. That's why, kung ano man ang ating pinagdadaanan ngayon, mga kapatid, let's take heart that God is over us, that He is beside us, that He is carrying us and working out His plans even at such a time as this. The second thing is we look for courage. We look for courage. Haman was an Agagite, a descendant of the Amalekites who are sworn enemies of the Jews naman. So we pick up the story in Esther chapter 3, beginning in verse 5. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not kneel down or pay him honor, he was enraged. Yet having learned who Mordecai's people were, he scorned the idea of killing only Mordecai. Instead, Haman looked for a way to destroy all Mordecai's people, the Jews throughout the whole kingdom of Xerxes. So, ayun na, si Haman, he goes to the king, and through his manipulation, was able to secure a royal edict, or madaling salita, a royal command, to commit genocide against the Jews. This edict, or this command, was to be implemented all throughout the Persian Empire, including the Jews that had already returned to Jerusalem. Every man, woman, and child were to be killed. Kaya si Mordecai asked the help of Esther to go to the king to help save the Jews. Pero hindi siya ganun kasimple. Kasi hindi ka basta-basta makakapunta kay Xerxes without an invitation. If you showed yourself without being summoned, pwede kang patayin. Unless otherwise, the king would extend his golden scepter towards that person. So Esther at first told Mordecai this problem. And so we pick up the story naman in Esther chapter 4, verse 12. When Esther's words were reported to Mordecai, he sent back this answer. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai. Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went away and carried out all of Esther's instructions. This was a defining moment for Esther, for she decided to risk her life for the sake of her people. Little did she know that her decision would save the entire Jewish race at that time. Even when we are in trouble or times are very hard, but if we decide to do what's right, to obey the word of the Lord, even when it is unpopular to do so, God will bless our faith. Many years ago, Irene, a sister in the Makati region, was hurting when her husband decided to leave the church back then. She had become a mother of two and was going through a very challenging time in her marriage. It takes great courage to stand for your faith, though it was very difficult for her to stay faithful to God. She held on and persevered. And yet, around 12 years ago, Irene helped her niece, Mitchie, become a disciple. In 2016 naman, her mother-in-law got baptized. In 2017, 3 of her office mates became disciples. Then last year, her oldest son, Miguel, studied the Bible and became a Christian. That same year, she vacationed in Vancouver and she invited 2 of her best friends since elementary, mga kaibigan niya na itong mga to, to a church service there. And both were baptized in Christ last January. To top it all, last month, her daughter Pauline became your sister in Christ. Tapos ngayon pa, Irene is helping to study the Bible with the mother of Mitchie and another office mate named Alma. And a younger daughter is doing her character studies also. Her courage in the midst of trials had helped 9 people become disciples of Jesus. You know, another disciple I am amazed by is Yvette. In 1992, as she was studying the Bible, she was in a serious relationship. Yet, the boyfriend, was not ready to commit to God. So she decided to end it with him and commit to Jesus on her own. Since then, she has helped serve in the singles ministry and is now helping even the younger sisters rise up to serve as well. It's amazing that she does not regret putting God first and serving in His church. It took courage to live by faith and not by sight. You know what? Esther could have backed off. Irene could have backed off. Yvette could have backed off. But they did not. Their courage helped change lives and helped change the eternal destiny of many people. We are going through challenging times today. No matter where you are and what you are doing, could it be that you are in that situation for such a time as this? We may not be in the same situation as Esther and Mordecai, but can we choose courage at such a time as this? Can we take courage and share our faith with our friends? Kasi sometimes we can think that wala tayong makakontribute to the ongoing challenges that's happening worldwide. But we can. If we take courage and share Jesus to our friends and even strangers, then we are offering a permanent solution by changing one heart at a time. Are there other ways we can be brave as Christians? Sometimes just standing up for integrity requires bravery. For those businessmen who pay their taxes correctly, that's brave. For students, especially ngayon, that you might be studying from home or working from home, malaki ang temptation to become lazy and even cheat. But if you decide to stand up for what is right, that's brave. For singles who choose to stay pure and trust God with your future, that is brave. For parents who are willing to humble themselves so we can be better moms and dads, that's brave. Let's not hold back. Instead, let's make these times a defining moment for all of us. The third point is we celebrate our freedom. Because of God's providence and the courage of Esther and Mordecai, the Jews had been saved. The tables were turned against their enemies, and they were defeated with the help of the Persian king. From then on, a celebration was decreed, and we read in Esther chapter 9 in verse 28. This day should be remembered and observed in every generation by every family, and in every province and in every city. And these days of Purim should never fail to be celebrated by the Jews, nor should the memory of these days die out among their descendants. Despite the overwhelming threat against them, the Jews were saved because one person took a stand, and a grateful nation remembered and celebrated out of gratitude. Just 2 days ago, our nation celebrated Independence Day. There is a need to remember. Lahat ng mga bayani na nag-alay ng kanilang mga buhay mula sa umpisa ng ating kasaysayan hanggang ngayon na tayo may mga bagong bayani na mga doktor, mga nurse, at mga frontliners na patuloy na nagsasakripisyo upang tayo ay maligtas. We should remember. And all the more, we should remember our own personal freedom when one man, Jesus, stood up and laid down his life for us so we can have freedom from the slavery of sin. Last May 16th, I celebrated 30 years of freedom because of Jesus. And there is nothing but deep gratitude in my heart. And I believe you share that gratitude too. Our ultimate freedom is coming when Jesus returns. But until then, let us fight for the freedom of others. And remember, we have a purpose. God has placed us here today, right now, for such a time as this. As we end, mga kapatid, let's look at a few questions that can help your discussions with your family or your discipling group later. Number 1, recall the coincidences and times when God moved in your life. So recall that. Yung coincidences ng buhay natin kung kailan kumilos ang ating Panginoon. Number 2, when have you chosen courage in the past? And what other areas in your life today calls for courage? And then number 3, share your gratitude for your freedom as a Christian and other blessings that you have received from God. May God bless you. God made us all for such a time as this.